Okay, the recording has started and we have, hold on one second.
Hey, Fernando, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
All right, Shanine's coming in.
All right.
All right, I think Shanine's here. Hello,
Beautiful.
Shanine.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I apologize. I'm actually at a site visit to a university, CCNY. It's all relative, and I'll explain it later. But happy to be here. So sorry, I apologize.
No problem. You can't have a party without you. And I think everybody is, I got everybody, I think, who's in the room. If anybody else comes in, let them in. Okay, well, welcome everybody for the third and final webinar for Soundview Economic Development, Economic Hub, EPA Technical Assistance Program through the revitalization program. I'm Dale Croup. I'm your sort of host today.
Got in other rooms.
What's that? Oh,
Yes.
and why don't we go around the room? I'd like to start with YMPJ.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join the YMPJ team to hear this exciting update with this project on the financial feasibility of the Soundview Economic Hub. I am David Shuffler, the Executive Director of YMPJ, and I will pass it to the YMPJ team. I'll pass it to Sid first.
Good afternoon, everyone. Siddhartha Sanchez. Excited that we're finally here. We've been working on this for years, and this is an important technical assistance component to furthering the project. I'm glad so many of our close friends could join us. Welcome, and I'll pass it to Madhur.
Hi everyone, my name is Madhur and I'm the Development Associate with the District. It's really exciting to see us here and forward to this project. I'm gonna pass it on to the Viranovo team.
We have several guests that are, why don't you introduce yourself? I'm looking right at Andrew, so we'll go with him.
How you doing? My name is Andrew Harris. I'm with Hester Street. I'm project manager, and I've been working on this very significant and special project for the better course of almost a year and a half now. It's a pleasure to be part of the continuation, and I'll pass it to my colleague Kristen. You're on mute, Kristen.
Thanks, Andrew. Kristen Chin, Director of Community and Economic Development over here at Hester Street. I've been working with Andrew and the YMPJ team. I'll pass it to Fernando.
Hi, everyone. Fernando Torado with the New York City Department of Health at the Bureau of Bronx Neighborhood Health. And I will pass it over to Juliet.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Juliet Brodowski with the Vita Nova team, and nice to be with you today. And you'll be hearing a little bit more from me later about our cost analysis of the Soundview EcoHub program. So nice to be with you.
All right, let's go to Alvaro.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Alvaro Munoz. I am a planner at the Department of City Planning in their Bronx office, and I'm very excited to be here. It's my first meeting, so I'm very happy. Thank you.
Jackie.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Rogers. I'm here. So my name popped up. I'm sorry. My name is Jacqueline Rogers, and I'm here on behalf of Edgemere Alliance and the Real CLT in Edgemere. I'm looking forward to learning more about your project. Thank you.
And forgive my mispronunciation, Miletus.
Hi everyone, my name is Melades Flores. I work for the San Miguel in Burgos. I'm the deputy chief. Not the deputy anymore. I'm the chief of staff, and I'm here to hear more about the project. We cover this district, and I'm very interested in find out how we can help. I'm a constituent as well, and thank you for inviting me to this meeting. I appreciate it. Nice meeting you, everybody.
Welcome. Nia Rock. Nia. All right. And if I repeat anybody, please forgive me again. We've a lot of folks on. Zakia, Grant.
Hello. I'm not sure if everyone can hear me. I'm not used to Teams. Okay, great. My name is Zakia Grant. I am a representative from Real Edgemere CLT out in Edgemere, the Rockaway Peninsula. And I'm here to just kind of see what the project is about and, you know, support the project all the way from the bottom of New York City. So, you know, just looking to learn more. Thanks.
And I see Mark McIntyre from.
Hi. Hi, this is Mark McIntyre. I'm the Director of the Mayor's Office Environmental Remediation. Interested to learn more about the project and the allocation of space.
Great. Okay, I think I covered everybody locally. If I missed anybody, we'll come back to you. Let's go to
Fernando. Did Fernando Ortiz, EDC, get to introduce himself?
Did he? Is he there?
Hello. Hello,
So-
everyone. I'm Fernando Ortiz, Assistant Vice President for Government and Community Relations at the New York City Economic Development Corporation, known as EDC. I manage the Upper Manhattan and Bronx and the Bronx portfolio. So very excited to be here today. A lot of friends I see on the call. Special shout out to the other Fernando in the room. Nice to see you.
Right, excellent. Thank you. Welcome. So let's go to EPA. We'll start with Ann.
Hi, my name is Ann Carroll. I'm with the EPA's Office of Brownfields and Land Revitalization in Washington, D.C., and I'm delighted to be joining you to hear about this project. And of course, I, like many of us, listen to whatever it is that Shanine tells us we have to do.
Well, that's a good segue. Let's go to Shanine.
Oh my goodness. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shanine Mitchell. I'm the Regional Brownfields Coordinator, and I work closely with David and Sid, as well as Juliet and Dale. Thank you guys so much for all the efforts that you put together to bring us and organize us to get this project off the ground. This has been one of the projects that I've loved a lot, and I put a lot of passion into it, even though I'm from New Jersey. I have, you guys will always have a place in my heart, and David knows that very well. So I'm also going to ask Vince if he can come in and say a few words, but thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my name is Vince Petrozello. I'm like Ann. I do whatever Shanine tells me to do. But I'm a contractor providing assistance to EPA Brownfields team. And I grew up not too far from that neighborhood, maybe about 5-10 minute drive. So, hey, Shanine, if something happens in the Bronx, I'd like to know about it. Mark, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Vince. Absolutely.
You're powerful, Shanine. You're powerful. Okay. All right. I think we got everybody. Now let's go to the rest of the Vita Nova team. We'll start with Milton.
Good morning, afternoon, everyone. This is Milton Reed. I've been a project coordinator from the beginning of this project. Very excited about the things that we'll be reporting today. I'll be more involved in some of the financial aspects of everything. And again, looking forward to it.
Jessica?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Jessica Corris. I'm part of the Vita Nova team, and I have discretionary land use approval on the private sector side in New York City for the last 15 years or so, and conducted a zoning analysis, and we'll walk you through the two paths forward that through the land use, from a land use perspective, later in the presentation. And I have to say, this is maybe the first time there's no other Jessica on the call. So Fernando, I feel you.
All right. Well, we have we could do a U.S. census with the size of this group we have today. So did I miss anybody in the introductions?
I think Nia.
Nia did. Yeah, we asked Nia. Is Nia there? Nia Rock.
I see Nia now. Maybe you could just unmute and just say hello.
Yeah,
There.
sorry, I had to step away for a moment. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be learning about the projects in more detail. My name is Nia Rock, and I'm with Bank United as a Community Development Officer. And I have over 30 years in the community development finance space. Everything that I'm learning so far, and our meetings yesterday with Wendy and Change Capital Fund were exciting. I'm very thank you very much for inviting me to be here and join you in this learning mode. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nia.
I'm so glad that you're able to join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, why don't we get started with the slide presentation? And David and YMPJ, I left space in the agenda for Hester Street to do an update. So when we get there, it'll be very shortly in this presentation, just so you know. So welcome again to the third webinar. We've done quite a bit of work since the hot summer when we came down and did a site visit, and to assist YMPJ with the economic hub at this location. It doesn't have an address yet, so we'll just say the Bruckner location. And this is the final action plan. Our scope as we go through it is to provide the technical assistance needed to come up with an action plan with some activities and to give guidance at a schedule and some costs for implementing it. So we did the introductions of the main team. Tetra Tech is a subcontractor under federal EPA. Steve couldn't be here today. And as I mentioned before, for those of you who logged in later, we are recording this presentation for anybody who's unable to be here today, or if you want to show it to anybody else. We'll distribute this after the after the presentation. By tomorrow, you'll have it in your inbox. So this has been, in terms of the team that's contracted to do the scope of work. This is the group of folks. Then everybody else is with us. Again, this is the third webinar. We did a combination webinar 1 and 2 back in November. We're supposed to deliver a final action plan. This is based on the preliminary action plan, which we talked about in webinar 2. But we also have done a couple like workshops with YMPJ to kind of talk through some of the issues. We're going to be talking about a financial analysis today in terms of a schedule. And then following this webinar, we will draft the final report, which everybody, of course, will have a look at. And lastly, I would just say regarding this slide that we have offered to meet with the community with YMPJ. If they want to have a community meeting, we're happy to come and do some version of this presentation so, wider range of people can hear about it. So today's, agenda, we have our scope that we have to fulfill. We're going to be talking about the pre-development and build-out costs, the program costs, so forth, what the final action plan says, which is building on what we've been doing, and then identifying the funding sources. But first on the agenda, David, I left space for the folks from Hester Street to sort of update everybody on this call as to what, where they left off and where they are now.
So Dale, let's see, Sid asked me to share the page 10 of the Hester Street report. So if you unshare, I'll just show that graphic.
Sure.
And then that'll be the context for what the area that we're talking about.
Here we go.
So go ahead.
And I'm going to jump in a little bit just to give a little history of the project. I'm going to spend a minute on that, and then I'll turn it over to Sid, who's going to give a little bit of more context about the site and the project. Everyone knows this is a site that's underneath the Bruckner Expressway and Bronx River Avenue. It's about 15,000 square feet of usable space, and probably about 6-7 years ago, our assembly member at the time, Assemblymember Crespo, and I had worked together around looking at this site and potentially replicating what many people are from New Yorkers might be familiar with, which is La Marqueta, which is in East Harlem on 116th Street and Park Avenue. And at the time, the assembly member and I would go back and forth trying to figure out how do we expand open markets and things like that. And we really thought about, all right, how do we get the state to turn over the site for community use and use it as an economic hub to support climate resiliency, economic development, art, do workforce development, and a whole host of other things. So about 6-7 years ago, we started this journey with the state, looking at the potential of what it would look like to use the site. The state did a feasibility study that did determine that we could actually use the 15,000 square feet for open market. So you see the image that you have is a rendering of that open market. From that feasibility study that was done in 2015, we've then been working with our local electeds. We worked with the bank community and the finance community, and we've been working with the EPA as well. So thank you, Shanine and Ann, for being on this call and your support over the years, because this support has allowed for us to envision and get us to this place where we are right now, where we're about to launch the economic hub. So let me turn it over to Sid, who's going to give a little bit more of site orientation, and then we'll turn it back over to Vita Nova.
Sure. So in order to share a little bit about the process that got us to this conceptual reuse plan, you kind of have to go back a few years to the listening that's been happening. I would add even, back to 2017, an early grant from Small Business Services and EDC, a placemaking grant that really allowed us to listen, engage, and envision what the space could look like, working with young people, working with artists, working with architects. That was an early evolution of the design. We built on that early design and that early collaboration with the city to create this updated conceptual reuse plan with Hester Street. The first step in the process was, again, listening. We had a number of sessions engaging both virtually and over surveys with many stakeholders back in 2021, I want to say that was. And from that, we also worked with a phase 1 of EPA technical assistance. Again, thank you, Shanine, for believing in us and working with us. The EPA has been a solid partner. Building off that first phase of TA, Hester Street was able to combine what they heard from listening with the TA to generate this conceptual reuse plan. The plan really lays out several of the concepts that were heard and most folks really advocated for, folks were really passionate about, and just alignment in terms of opportunities as well. As you'll see, in yellow, to start there, are incubator stalls, or what we imagine as manufacturing and incubation space for small businesses and entrepreneurs that are looking to scale maybe a cottage business or something that they're doing on the commercial corridor. If they need a space to make or manufacture, these spaces would be available. The orange shows a bit of open space and ways for the public to engage in the space with those vendors or entrepreneurs. In blue is a stage area, so really emphasizing the possibilities around culture. The red space is a training space and a community classroom, really thinking and addressing the points that were raised and that we heard around workforce development. There's also a greenhouse that you might notice and some plants in there. A big part of what we heard would be critical to addressing some of the priorities in the community was how do we address air quality, how do we green our community, how do we grow food. It was important for us to do the listening that we did after COVID and during COVID because so much changed. And I think a lot of what the new vision around the economic hub has been around economic resiliency and food security, food sovereignty. Last but not least, and really transformative at a scale level, is the inclusion of a clean soil bank towards the top of the image, and the idea that we could bring clean fill from city construction sites and marry it with compost from a nearby sanitation facility in Soundview Park to create high quality topsoil that would allow us to cap toxic growing areas and really exponentially increase urban agriculture and parks throughout the Bronx. And so those are some of the uses that came up in our listening and some of what is shown in this visual.
Great. Okay. Anything else? I think you have to unshare, then I have to reshare, correct?
Yes.
All right. Juliet's my technology. I always ask her to be my backup just in case something goes awry with technology. It's coming. It has to take a second. Oh. Okay, here we go. All right, yes. So, when we finish the presentation, we're gonna sort of summarize a little bit how this ties into the broader mission, and I think in the community's needs as well. We've been working with YMPJ since the previous project, and on the train station, and we're aware of the broader mission and how this all ties together. So let me just go to where we left off, and we left off, and this was the last slide. So our task is to provide the most practical action plan with funding and the schedule. We've done a considerable amount of research. Juliet and I came down and did a site visit in the summer, and we've had multiple work sessions. Actually, I could probably update this slide because we just did a couple more. We've reviewed lots of documents, did some stakeholder interviews with folks, some of the folks on this call, other folks like Mr. Bayer, who was very instrumental in giving us valuable information. And again, today is the webinar 3, and the final action plan will come in February. So you're going to see these action steps throughout the presentation. We've not only looked at the uses, a lot of the things that Sid was talking about, but we actually came up with a way to sort of involve the community and activate the space, as well as find uses that would be income producing, because it's economic sustainability is really important to keeping going. So we ended up coming up with 5 action steps, which again, you can see them on the screen. To activate the space, for example, there's no address, a simple thing like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about all those steps, how to secure it, how to implement different programs, and to create a culture. We're going to talk about different costs, because whenever you do a project that is multifaceted like this, you have in-kind costs, you have some startup soft costs, like what they're going to have to deal with in terms of permitting and things like that. Hard costs for construction. We took some of the work of Hester Street in considering that, but some of that work was done by DOT in making the space a little bit more viable than where we started. And then once you get going and they manage the program, whether they do it third party or they do it in-house, YMPJ is going to have some recurring soft costs that are going to have to be accounted for financially. So we will cover all of that. So with that, we had all of these action steps. I'm going to turn it over to Juliet to start talking through the action steps, and you'll see us trading time on these slides because we've all worked on it in different ways.
Okay, so again, based on the conceptual plan that we reviewed, that Hester Street worked on, that another consulting firm worked on, ICF, in last year, we took a practical look at the space and said, okay, there's a wish list of about 30 action items that you guys would like to undertake underneath and in the space. And we tried to come at it with a more pragmatic lens to say, okay, given the context, given the organization, given the facility is a city-owned property underneath a state highway, how would this all work? So what we went over last time is really that action plan. What do we think, or how would we advise that you undertake these activities? And then today's presentation is, how would you fund it? How would you finance it? unlike some of the other facilities that we looked at, this would be managed by Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice as a non-governmental organization. So you have a little bit of different approach than you might have like at La Marqueta or some of the other EDC oriented or leased facilities. So this is really a unique opportunity for the community group to work with both the city and the state to activate the space with the purpose of bringing economic activity, safety, and activating an underutilized space, and maybe even creating a model on how you might activate these underutilized space in these in the New York community. So the first step, we said, okay, listen, you really don't have many resources for this project right now besides these technical assistance contracts, some of the in-kind work. So what would you need to do first? Well, first of all, we're trying to give you some low-cost solutions. That these, low cost. Again, this is kind of like a key that we put together. It's very. This is our analysis. So this is for discussion or for consideration. Low cost might be zero to maybe a maximum of $25,000 total cost. So first of all, we're advising that you guys YPMJ work with the New York City Department of Finance to actually assign a street address to this space, because where is it? What is it? Right now, it's undefined as a space. It's constructed. It was a part of the Hunts Point Interstate Access Project as a community mitigation measure. So it's a real place. It has been completed. But if you're going to go forward as using the space as a business incubator, you need an address. Once you get an address, you can start promoting it and telling people where to go and where is it. How do you get there? Directions. I know in the past you've used the space for public art exhibits. Again, these are very low cost items. Start to reactivate the space as a real space. These could be very, very low cost or very no cost action items. One of the things that David and Sid have been talking about is do a ribbon cutting. Has the city planned that, or is it on the map yet? That's usually the first thing that can really get people kind of engaged and excited. And it's a very simple, but it needs an action. It needs an action step for somebody to actually say, yes, we want to officially dedicate this facility. So again, who's involved in this? Well, obviously YMPJ as a community organization, potentially an event coordinator, and then New York City to actually, approve the use of the site for these uses. So working with the city of New York isn't always so straightforward, for community groups. So having that authorization or that approval is a very important first step to say, yes, YMPJ, you're the designated community group. Let's get this going. So that's the first step. You can go to the next slide, Dale. Oops, okay. Number two, then this gets a little more complicated, because as you move through and you cut the ribbon and you get an address, what is the relationship over the long term? So one of the things we looked at, there's no formal agreement, even though the paperwork seems to indicate that YMPJ is going to be the the designated community group to utilize the space. Really, what are the terms of that agreement? What can they do there? What can they not do there? Who's providing the maintenance? Who's actually owns the keys? What kind of permits are required? Jessica's going to talk a little bit about more specifically some of the permits that might be triggered. So we're advising here that the community group YMPJ actually negotiate and have an official contract. And Mark just said, what city manages the site? Well, that's one of the unknowns. At this point, we think it's going to be New York City DOT, but we have Vita Nova has not gotten confirmation that that ultimately will be the entity. So it's a state facility. That's the road, and it's a city-owned facility underneath. That's what we were told. So who has responsibility for that? So that's part of the whole the process of you can't just use a site for any kind of use. You have to actually have some kind of understanding with the city of New York, right? That yes, we can use it from Monday to Friday or 7 days a week or 24 hours a day under these terms. We can do these types of activities. So this is very important. So in addition to some of the in-kind costs, obviously, that YMPJ is going to be putting towards this project, this is where you may actually need some startup costs for your organization to have, legal reviews, somebody to negotiate a contract, somebody to understand, permitting in New York City. So this starts to get a little more complicated. Maybe EDC and New York State Empire Development Corp. That is, I'm not sure if that's a question, but maybe you can clarify that. But this is what we're saying, that this is a really important part of this process, that YMPJ, again, is the community group that wants to use the space. They would be a party to some kind of a use agreement, but somebody else has to allow that and approve that. That would likely be New York City, and that would likely be negotiated by a third party with some outside legal help. So YMPJ may have some costs here to get this started. This could be a very high cost item, depending on the ultimate uses. Jessica's going to talk about that. It could be a lower cost. So something to be aware of in this process. Did somebody have a question about other groups that might be involved? Feel free to ask a question. Go ahead.
I was just saying that who might ultimately be in charge, and usually it's not a city agency that might be in charge to collect the rent, and that the city might delegate that to EDC or some combination with Empire State Development Corporation.
Okay. So that would be very helpful to those folks on the call to help answer these questions, because these are still unknowns. And but we know that this is going to be a factor in the process. So our last conversations with Thomas Bayer at the state of New York, who's managing it as a state facility project, that transfer had not happened yet. So we're still trying to get to the bottom of that. But again, if people want to take down their homework assignments, that would be extremely helpful as we go forward. So on the next slide, this is where you start to get actually implementing, the activities that you saw, the yellow, and the red and the green and the schematic of the site. Once you have that operating agreement and you have some, authorization to move forward, there's a lot of things that the community group can do there. And some are, again, very low costs, and some might be, higher costs. So this is where you start to build the budget, to say, okay, we have some in-kind services that we're providing and some of our partners are providing, but we need some soft costs to get some things started. We're going to need, some hard costs to buy some equipment or, the portable trailers. And then, we want to run this over time. So this is really where you're starting to be a program manager. And this might be, a program that's operated by the YMPJ with partners. So these are some of the important costs that we're seeing as a part of this phase, this step. You want to work with New York City to make sure the lights are on, the gates are open, that again, there's authorized access. When we were there in July, there was, crossing guards to make sure that people could cross and enter the facility safely. We have a call in with Navarro. Okay. Thank you for your comments, but feel free to, if anybody wants to say anything on the line, feel free to do so. So, people want to walk, they want to get their bikes in there. So these are some things, low cost items that, again, safe access needs to be planned for and then implemented. Pop-up events, Hester Street now has a branding plan. It's the Soundview Eco Hub. It's a thing. What are some events that can be organized right away in addition to the ribbon cutting? We talked about like a bike giveaway program, or the soil bank as a potential, summer use, to say, okay, community, come get your soil. We're going to have a community gardening event. These are things that you can start to activate and populate the site now to get the community engaged in the site. Over the long term, we think that there are some deficiencies in the roadway network to get people in and out of there. So some additional planning could be contemplated for site access over the long term, getting people into the site, over to Concrete Park, bikeways, crosswalks, permanent facilities that really makes it safe and easy for people to get in and out of there. there's a school there, there's a park, if you want to have people crossing that Bruckner Boulevard, you're going to have to take a look at that. So again, that gets into some long-term planning and then even some implementation dollars to maybe implement crosswalks, crossing guards, lights, that kind of thing. So the folks that would be involved at this stage, again, YMPJ as the community organization, New York City DOT to look at, site access improvements, and New York City Office of Environmental Remediation already has a soil bank program, as we learned. So thank you, Mark. That was great information, where they could be a provider of materials in kind under their current budgets to get the soil bank donation program going right at the site. So that is an early action item that could really, again, put the site on the map and get people engaged and tie into your other programming in the neighborhood. Finally, this gets into the other phase of the more permanent facility planning that YMPJ is interested in. So part of the site plan is incorporating a business incubator, community classrooms, community space, to use the space for a site address and a location so that businesses can come into the community, have a space, have a safe space to start their business. So this is that beginning of that phase. Again, if you're going to be trying to attract businesses ultimately to operate the space on your behalf, which is one of the things that YMPJ said they're interested in, is that who are the businesses? Who are they? So one of the things we recommended perhaps is having a business competition in the community. Seek a wide, put out a wide net, to have a competition where you say, okay, bring us your ideas. How do you want to implement the space? Does a private company want to operate the soil bank and have some kind of other, economic activity with it? Do you need prizes and incentives to bring the businesses in and get, really creative about what kind of uses can go there? So this is, again, a startup phase, but you'll see in the next slide, it's really kind of the more important step as a precursor to then making some of these facilities permanent. I mean, La Marqueta is a great example. There's actual businesses operating there, so who are the businesses that really want to be operating down in the South Bronx? And the partners need to be taken care of as well. So next slide, just one more slide about the cost analysis. Once you again, figure out who the business partners are and who are going to be the permanent uses, whether they're, small businesses or other kind of entrepreneurs, you're going to want to implement those activities. So that's when the costs get a little higher, because you may look at like purchasing and installing portable trailers, purchasing and installing, permanent bathrooms, purchasing and installing permanent fixtures underneath, the highway structure that really remain there and support this business culture. So Dale's going to next talk about then what does that look like in terms of an overall budget? Because in the original plans, the budget was very large. So we've tried to pare it down to a more feasible level that we think could actually be implemented, given some of the resources that we know. So Dale, take it away, unless there's any questions. But
right. Yeah,
go
and
ahead.
feel free to ask questions as we go along. Anything from what Juliet just covered before we move on to the broader budget and timing? Okay, so the tasks that she refers to are the steps, and the steps include lots of different kinds of funding, including your own in-kind contributions. And again, as Juliet said, we took some of the costs of what Hester Street did. Some of the work was already done by DOT to cover some of the baseline infrastructure improvements. We took some ranges and took averages. You have some flexibility here. Task 5, where you have 3 mobile classrooms, you might start with 1 or 2. So you have some flexibility here, and this is a reasonable budget to get going with some of the major activities that we talked about, so the soil bank and the incubator, to be precise. And then there's some things that would be a cost no matter what. So these are sort of like the broadest costs for building out the space and getting started. This is sort of a good summary, a good place to go. And you can save money in different ways, depending on whether you have, for example, regulated uses or unpermitted uses that you have to spend more time on attorneys and so forth getting permitted. The second sort of category of costs are the reoccurring costs. Ultimately, once you build out the project, you're going to have annual costs to operate it. You may not have employees. You might manage this through a third party. There's a good chance that you will. I know we've talked about that. Some of the costs we found that are less on the build out phase. For example, when we interviewed Mark, we realized that the cost of the soil bank outside of the permitting part wouldn't be as high on the construction side. But on the ongoing side, you're going to need to have money, and then therefore you're going to have income that's sustainable and not dependent on grants all the time. You're certainly going to have security issues, whether you have your own system or you have, police officers that are off duty that you have to pay. You're going to have signage and branding, which will be really important. And again, do you need 3 to 5 program managers? Well, you may need 2 to 3, but you're definitely going to need a solid 3. So that's the upper end of the range of the 250. So you have build out costs and operating costs. So the next question is, how do you pay for that? And how do you pay particularly for the build out costs? I'm going to turn it over to Milton to kind of go through a bunch of slides on potential funding sources that we have discussed with you and some new ones that have come up.
You're on mute.
Thank you. And sorry about that. So in the interest of time, I'm going to not read these line for line, but kind of go through them in a more of a summary format. We will have all of this in our final report. What we did to try to make this easy and readable was we put these funding sources in categories, and then subsequent, what you'll see is how each item, each of these 5 areas that we identified is what you can do next, and next after that, potential funding sources that fit right in. So hopefully it's a good snapshot for everyone to do that. And again, with me too, feel free to jump in. Something is going on with my internet. I cannot see anyone's face, so I won't be able to see you motion or even raise a hand. So again, feel free to jump in. But in this particular area of these small planning and implementation grants, various from different places. And I think Fernando, did you have something?
Yeah, sorry, I was I had to jump on a quick call, but one of the things that I wanted to make note of as I see the potential funding sources, and sorry, I'm in my hotel room because I'm in Vietnam right now. But you know, representing the New York City Economic Development Corporation, I would encourage for YMPJ and this project team to look at potential funding sources that you could acquire through EDC, through the city's EDC, whether it's through our IDA funding or, any of our other kind of investments, because, this is the Soundview kind of economic hub, right? So it has an economic development component to it that I think that, EDC would definitely be willing and interested to have a role, right? Usually EDC gets very much involved when it's either a planning initiative or when it's, something on city property, but we also do, fund a lot of projects that are related to economic development. So I would encourage you all to look into some of those potential funding sources, and happy to maybe have a follow-up call with the project team and coordinate with folks in EDC who could maybe learn more about this project and recommend ways in which we could be involved. But definitely look into EDC's potential funding sources because there's a lot there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And even a couple that we found, we cannot. There's so much out there. We could not put it all in this presentation. We may have a little bit more in the final report. But the New York City Empire State Development Grant Fund. We feel that there's a lot of check boxes that may make those two a match. The Nonprofit Infrastructure Capital Improvement Program. That's another one that, again, when we look at the check boxes of what the project goals and align with what some of the grant requirements are, those are certainly through something through the city that we feel should be really take a close look at. But one area that we have found quite a bit of success lately is in Section B, which is this private contributions, donations, and sponsorships. And we are seeing more and more a willingness for the large corporations and the large developers, and some of these, what I call, we all can identify when we see the red circle, we identify Target, but who's building all of these Target stores around in places like that, that don't have as identifiable organizations, but still very well funded. Well, YMPJ fits a lot of check boxes for some of their needs and their obligations that they want to make to the communities in which they develop and have their large businesses in. So those are avenues. Next slide, please. Those are avenues that we think that should be flushed out a little bit more, and even sponsorships through signage or whatever it may be, to get some interest and some dollars into the area. Okay, Dale, next slide.
But before we jump to the next slide, I just wanted to just say thank you, Fernando, for offering up those connections with EDC. You all have been a long partner with us, and yeah, just thank you, and thank you for joining us all the way from Vietnam. So
Yeah, absolutely. What time is it there, Fernando? You have to be at 3 o'clock in the morning, right?
It is almost 2 a.m., but
Yeah.
I have a work day today. I had a nice long nap. And I'm of the mind when, I'm a Bronx boy and committed to a lot of Bronx projects, and this is something that I've been wanting to learn a lot more of. So I'm here for it. I have time.
Okay, well, and again, thanks a lot. And so, and I'm just moving on this particular one, and I'm trying to go as fast as I can to my team. Environmental Justice Collaborative Problem Solving Program. This is the program. There are two. There's so much coming out that some of it is new, and I think these were announced within the last couple weeks. And you will see here what is targeted here is that not only do you fit a bunch of these check boxes, but this is ready to go live right now. April 10th is submission dates. And again, when you see our step ones and step twos, the funding sources, they fit right into what you need to get done and some of these earlier steps that we are recommending. Next slide. Similar here, this is relatively new. It's a government to government program, but if you are able to partner and have this as a part of the project, a lot of the check boxes line up. Next slide, please. And again, these you can read them for yourselves. The City of New York Environmental Remediation Soil Bank Program. We will provide this information website to dig deeper. Thriving Communities programs. This U.S. Department of Transportation. I know that YMPJ is very sophisticated at seeking out some of these grants, especially from the EPA realm. Department of Transportation may be equally as friendly. And again, using your expertise, you've been very successful in doing that. So we think these are two that we know fit well within what you're trying to do. And, I also mentioned the National Endowment for the Arts. That is not here, but I mean, when you look at the check boxes, what you want to do as far as attraction and artwork and programming, especially in some of those temporary stages 1 and 2, those might be some good synergies to dig into that area. We'll provide that in the final report. Okay, next slide. Last but not least, this is my last slide. Again, we're just trying to be comprehensive in a snapshot of where you have to think a little bit out of the box. Farmers Market Promotion Program, the website will be given to everyone to take a look at that. Community project funding earmarks. We can have the full webinar about that topic. Revenue related to the business incubator. Now, this is interesting, and you can read that article, kind of gives you an idea where it transforms what you're trying to do in phases of funding. So you start off with business incubator, then from incubator, from incubator program, you go to what we define as an accelerator program. And the accelerator program has different models of revenue generation, even through partnering with some of the businesses or different types of fees that really is graduated from a startup incubator program to how do you really get them to the next level and on to a full independence. So that's something that we think is quite frequently overlooked when you talk about incubator. We don't want incubator businesses to remain incubators forever. There should be a time-defined process to that graduation or matriculation to the next level. Okay, I was going pretty fast. Any questions on that for me? Then let me just do this last slide, which again, we tried to bring this up to say the steps 1 through 5 that Juliet went through. We did want to make sure that there were clear, identifiable potential sources for funding. And if you read down the list where you can get started, we always ask, what is next? And outside of those new ones that deal with environmental justice, that could be immediately next, and that is through the EPA. These are some steps that we say, hey, we're trying to lay this out in a very succinct way where Dave, Sid, and company can really jump on top of this. Okay, any questions? Okay, Juliet, I'll turn it over to you to go through this section here next. Not Juliet, Jessica.
Yes, that's me. Hello again. Thanks. Thanks so much, Milton. I want to cover real quickly before I jump into these two paths that you can take, just a little background on the New York City zoning resolution. And to some of you on the call, that might sound basic and boring, but there is some background before we go into this. As I mentioned, some of you are aware that New York City is guided by the New York City zoning resolution. And the zoning establishes the district, the basic use, the floor area, the building envelope, and any requirements that are applicable within those districts apply with a letter and a number and a dash and a number. This property is located in an M11 zoning district. As previously mentioned, we have no address, but we also have no block and lot. So we do have some steps to take to get not just an address, but a tax lot and be assigned that. So real quickly, the M11 zoning district really focuses on light industrial. It allows a certain use groups, we call them, use groups 4 through 14 and 16 and 17. What that means is you go to a 60-page appendix in the zoning resolution and you look it up and you say, what use do I have in mind? Is that allowed in what my zoning district is defined as? And so in this case, based off the, and it's also next to an R6, yes, so that will give you other setback requirements. So thanks, Alvaro. I did not notice that. I'm not an architect by training. I have a planning background, but we will need a full zoning analysis to move forward with this, just as a heads up. But so back to uses real quick. In the schematic plans that we were looking at earlier, there's some uses that are allowed in what's called as of right development. For all the trouble New York City has in development and construction, they have this wonderful path forward called as of right development. And if you fit the requirements of an as of right development, you take your plans in, you get your approvals, you get your permits, and then you can go start. And that's what we're looking at here on this slide. It's a timeline for a simple path forward of conforming and complying with the M11 zoning regulations. And so I've provided a estimate breakdown of the costs associated with that. Juliet mentioned earlier the site use, access, and agreement with the City of New York. We can't forget that the state of New York is on top of us, and there will also be some coordination back and forth with them. In terms of plans, you'll go through a level of different set of drawings, the schematic drawings. Department of Buildings will require a different set of drawings, and then your contractors will require a third set of drawings. And so I can't really provide an estimate on that cost based off of what your kind of agreement you come to with your architect. It's going to be a percentage usually. But again, those agreements are complex with architects and engineers and with contractors. And again, you might want outside legal counsel to review those agreements.
The Department of Finance is listed on here. They're the department who will help assign this tax lot, and that is essential for getting the address. And again, the Department of Buildings approves your plans and provides the permit to building an as-of-right development. Now, I'm estimating this takes about a year. It can be done quicker. It can be done, depending on how backed up they are, it could take longer. But I just wanted to provide a quick check off the boxes. Now, thank you. Next slide is the non-conforming uses. Unfortunately, based off the research that I've done, there's a couple of the big programs in this space are not allowed as one of the use groups in an M11 zoning district. Specifically, anything as a community center, it's a sub of use group 4 called 4A, and that'll require a special permit from the City Planning Commission. And unfortunately, anything labeled as topsoil storage is a use group 18. There are some agricultural uses allowed in use group 4B, but there is some limits. They want to make sure that there's no nuisance associated with that or sale. So you would have some limitations. But so if you decide to go forward with a non-conforming use, the timeline stretches out. So starting with the site use and access agreement, if you know that you're going to go forward with this non-conforming use, getting the city and the state to provide some sort of support, or in the case of OER's soil bank, they had a mayoral override, which, in everybody's dream that happens. But then you leave out consultants like me to help you. But so if you can't get a mayoral override for your zoning or a state override to your zoning, there's going to be some back and forth between preparing the plans and then hiring a land use attorney to guide you through the process. And the land use attorney is really going to guide you through all the additional consultants you're going to need, all the maps, the photos, the studies, the additional engineers. There's a lot of back and forth meetings with your local city planning representative. There's going to be meetings with your city council person. There's going to be meetings with your community board. And that's all before the project even goes public. Once the project goes public and is in a public review, that's great news. You're 90% of the way there, because then they're on a schedule. And then you can start to really garner those votes and support with the people who are going to have the ultimate decision and say on your use here. So again, this is a much longer timeline. It's going to be much more costly. City planning process is not for the faint-hearted, but with the right land use attorney, you can get through it. So I would recommend that if these uses are essential for the program, and it sounds like they are, it is worth the time and effort to go forward with a non-conforming use. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone want to talk more about zoning and use groups?
Well, we have a couple hours scheduled after.
It's only 60 pages of uses.
I can also follow up internally with you guys and find out what will be the easiest and faster process that we can proceed as well.
Great. So the next slide sort of incorporates what Jessica talked about in terms of timeline. We try to put everything in one slide here. sort of like the timeline that it's going to take. Some things you can do right away in 2023 in terms of activating the space. It tells you roughly how much it's going to cost, and the funding sources that Milton was referring to, we went over before. And again, we'll send out a copy of this presentation in addition to the final report. The site permits obviously is going to happen over time. It's going to cost money over time. Again, you start off with the things you can get done right away to bring attention and funding and attract funding to the site. That's always a big one. As soon as you activate the space, you'll attract more funding. And all the steps that Juliet outlined before, they're all in a schedule roughly. And we think that you could completely implement this plan over the next few years, particularly in the next 2 to 3 years. There are some things that are going to take longer to create sort of an ecosystem within the incubator and accelerator that Milton was talking about. You need time. If you're incubating companies, and I've been involved with several incubators, it literally takes 2 to 3 years for them to get to the next stage for an accelerator. You might have a superstar along the way, but that's something that's going to over time. But by then you'll be doing lots of things with the community, and this gives you a sense of how long it's going to take. It's not as daunting as I thought when we first started working on this project. Dave said in Medora, so I think a lot of this is doable in the near future. So there's lots of things, particularly what Jess went over, all kinds of, lots of back and forth, a lot of funds being spent, a lot of public meetings, lots of documents being shared. But we wanted to just list sort of the low-hanging fruit, the things you could work on right away to show some success within your own organization and within the city and with funders. Honestly, the funders want to know what the status is of the property. And these are some of the things that we thought would be like key things for you to focus on in 2023. And I think a lot of them, even in the first half of 2023, we're almost in February already. But I think you can get going with a lot of this stuff. So this is, getting the actual transfer straightened out on what's going on, the address, because you're going to need that for funding. They're going to ask what the address is. Getting the agreements together, your grant writing capacity. We talked a little bit about this with you on the train station, the Amtrak, the train station from last year. And this all ties together with your other parts of your mission. Getting out to your partners, as Jess said, definitely hiring a land use attorney to really give you a more finite schedule and cost analysis. And of course, the soil bank marketing logistical plan, that's something you can work on with Mark. And he's a great resource. It was a very, very informative meeting that we had with him. And then to get some things going, you have to really start getting the project out there, bring attention to it, have some events. You can do that. But really also important will be the questions around public safety, and therefore looking at the air and noise monitoring systems. A lot of the grants you're going to apply for are going to require this. Of course, your permitting is also going to require it. And sort of last but not least on the slides, this is from my conversation with our friends at EPA in particular. This is a project by itself, but it's also a project that's tied to the overall mission of YMPJ, but also addresses community needs depending on how it develops over time. So the impacts on the community at large are great. I mean, you can, depending on how you deal with the soil bank and other food related things, and also related to your other parts of your strategy, you'll deal with food insecurity and community health, not just individual health, but community health. Certainly there's jobs to create. You are all about environmental and economic justice. There's so much opportunity here to do something positive in terms of the environment and justice, of course. And there couldn't be a better product to engage the community, because that's what this action plan is all about, a way to engage the community as well as have a sustainable economic model. So we do think there are longer term impacts beyond just the project itself. And I think it will develop, and you'll be able to tie this with together with the other sites. So that is the presentation for today. I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions and discussion or comments, whatever you have. Again, we're recording this, so everything, we'll be able to, if you miss something, you'll be able to listen in later on or share it with somebody else. Are there any other comments? There's got to be something over there. Dave. Sid.
Sure.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get off of mute. No, we talked a lot. I want to open it up to folks to see if there's anything to add before close out. And I specifically want to give a little space to Andrew. I'm glad you raised your hand because I was gonna sub-volunteer you to see if you had anything to share. So yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say thank you for all of the thoughtful work that's gone into it. It's really wonderful to see these next steps laid out in this capacity, and to really have the opportunity to look at, not only what we discussed previously, but also looking at the necessary kind of things to take into consideration. It's having the ability to kind of look at not even just a year out, but even going a couple of years down the line and looking at what the longevity of this in particular, the Soundview Economic Hub in particular, could have has been really, really great. And I think with regards to the plan, the conceptual reuse plan that was shared, if it could just be brought back up on the screen just for 1 second, just so that I could just say some words on it, because I think that plan really it kind of lays out really the next steps as we got to with the work from the community, with the working with SGA as well, and just kind of puts it into perspective really what the end goal is. And this plan was developed with a lot of the underpinnings of the discussions that we had with YMPJ and with the community at large. So I think it's really important to look at what the community wanted to see, to look at what we came to as kind of a overall group of goals to be housed in this economic hub, and then pair that with the real questions about how is this going to be run, how is it going to be maintained. And I think for me, the most interesting thing about this entire process is that we do at the moment not have a tax lot, or it doesn't really exist on the map. And I think bringing that into the reality is like the first, as you said, concrete step. I think it's great. So and the different spaces that were imagined, like this kind of gone through a couple of iterations. So this is where it was left at our last kind of major milestone. But a big kind of point is this is a conceptualized vision that doesn't include the roadway on top of it. So as we think about these things, it's important to think about how the space is going to be accessed, how light is going to get there. We touched on what the branding would look like and the different opportunities that will present themselves, as we kind of get further along. But I think it's important to recognize that this is a highly visualized kind of goal for what we anticipate. But as it stands, there's a lot of work to kind of get from where we are right now to here. So this should be really kept at the forefront of everyone's minds as we kind of embark on this process. And that's all. Thank you very much, David.
No,
But I might add, Andrew and YMPJ, for consideration, you may want to think about updating the renderings based on what we learned as a part of this phase, particularly because originally I think you all envisioned a very large space of 30,000 square feet of usable space. As we learned, that in reality, the usable space is about half of that. And you probably won't need as much a build out, as you originally envisioned. So to have a new rendering with that concept, a revised concept that might include 2 to 3 classrooms, restrooms, and the soil bank with some improved access, where would that come from? How would people get in and out? Where do bike racks go? Again, the lighting, I think that's something we didn't include as a recommendation for you, but maybe something you all want to consider as a next step to really, take another, take another revision at it. It gets your mind flowing, but, take it down another level.
Thank you for that, both Andrew and Juliet. Yeah, I think that feedback is well taken. We actually just dropped in the chat the conceptual reuse plan that we worked on with Hester. So everyone has access to that document electronically, and you can get to see the robust planning that went into it and all the insightful thoughts and feedback. So please take a look at that.
Okay, anybody on, I see we have still like 20 something people on this call. Comments, there certainly will be more going on, obviously, at the local level, and we're going to share our final report with everyone, which will have all of our market analysis. Milton did a lot of work on the other markets around the country and in the world, I think, to use as examples. And we're going to have a section on grants, a little bit more detail. Jessica's certainly going to have a lot more information in her final report, where we really get into the weeds. But I think we covered a lot in a little under 90 minutes here. So
yeah, Dale,
yeah.
this is Vince Petrozello again with EPA.
Hey, Vin.
Just a couple other thoughts. I don't know if you guys have contacted any local universities. A lot of times they could help you with planning. The CCNY might be able to help out. Philanthropic organizations, there's always money available to those guys.
Right.
I think you mentioned USDA, DOT, HUD, and EDA. Those are good sources. And maybe a nice, well-placed letter to a local congressional rep. Say, hey, we're trying to do this. Could you guys,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
there's no doubt that will happen. I'm very confident that will happen.
Right. But usually universities and philanthropic organizations are pretty good with this stuff and they're helpful.
Great point about the universities. I think they're an underappreciated resource, overall in most community planning.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Carol, yes. Please do.
Yes.
Please do. Yes.
Yeah, I just have to make my shameless plug as ambassador to Brownfields 2023. Have you thought about submitting this as a presentation to the conference? Because I think, more and more we have communities thinking, talking, urban ag, soil safety, access to public health, reconnecting our communities to food. And so you have in a nice project combined all of that beautifully. So I think there'd be lots of folks that would love to hear about this. So
it's in Detroit, for those of you who don't know.
It is Detroit, August 7 to 11. So I don't promise everybody will love it as much as I do, but
Well, you pay for it is what they're gonna.
That changes.
Right, David?
That changes things. I know Shanine has been talking about that conference for some time, and if we can, we would love to submit and potentially share this project out at a Brownfield conference. We would love that opportunity.
David, there's a call for ideas right now as we speak. So you should check out the EPA National Brownfield Conference website. There's a website.
Yeah, we got it on our radar now, and we will.
February 6th is the deadline. Let me just say it so everybody, it sticks.
Can we just post that link? Maybe later we'll email the link. It's
Yeah.
pretty easy to get to the site. We can email that, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I've attended that conference about 8 or 9 times, and there's always really interesting things. And I always learn 5 new things.
I'll try to.
Okay. All right, we're at 2:20 about. Anybody else before we say goodbye?
Shanine, go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. This was a really, really great presentation. I picked up so much and I learned so much. And as far as the EJ funding is concerned, we could definitely provide you with some support on that and see how we can get you teed up for applying for that EJ funding. So I'm looking forward to that, and anything that I could do to support this as well, just let me know. But I think this is a really great conversation, and Vince added some really good points as well. So we're going to talk internally. I'm looking forward to sharing this recording with my team so we can try and see if we can help out with some aspects of the funding. So thank you so much again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shanine. Thanks for your support and input.
Yeah, and before we go, there's just a few more thank yous that I wanted to share. Just definitely wanted to share thank you to Shanine and Ann for joining us. Shanine, thank you for always being just a constant supporter and accessible. You've really been a tremendous support for this project and many others. The Assembly Member's Office, thank you, Assembly Member Burgos. So we were joined by Milatis, the Chief of Staff. Thank you for that. Our consultants, Hester has been really critical, along with Vita Nuova, as getting this process forward. Want to give a shout out to all the CLTs, Edgemere, that joined us. We love to be part of your family, and thank you for all the direction that you give us around economic democracy and shared equity and stuff like that. Also want to support our other, and give a shout out to our other funders, our newest funders, Change Capital. We were joined by Nia Rock from Bank United, so I want to just give a shout out to that. And then all the reps from the city, Fernando Tejado from Department of Health. Give a shout out to you, Fernando Ortiz from EDC, all the way from Vietnam. I want to give a shout out to you.
Wow.
And Alvaro from DCP. I was looking through the pictures and didn't see a picture. So just want to thank you all for all your support and taking the time for us today. We'll circle back with a link for this and have some individual follow-up conversations with you all. So thank you.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, we will say goodbye. If the Vita Nova team could just stay on, just so, because we have to talk about the action plan for a couple minutes. We can just stay on just for 5 minutes after. But if there's nothing else, everybody have a great day. And any follow-up, we'll share all the information in links.
Great job. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye all.
Thank you. Okay.
Are you stuck? Did you start recording?
Oh, yes.
We stayed off for just 1 second. It looks like everybody jumped off. Thought maybe